Hey, hello everybody. Today is Thursday, my regular scheduled broadcast. Real Progressives, Thursday night, 8 o'clock. I'm going to be talking today about our addiction problem, our opioid epidemic, as well as the gun violence problem in society. And I'm going to be talking about the solutions for all of this using the knowledge of our operational reality, MMT. I'm getting sick of looking all over Facebook and all over social media and MSM and seeing everybody just focus on superficial feel-good policy prescriptions that do nothing to change the root problem of of the problems that we're facing in society. So I'm going to start by talking about the opioid epidemic. The first thing you hear when people talk about this is that the problem is the doctors prescribing it. And I'm here to tell you that is not the problem. That is not the root problem of this. The doctors, there were doctors prescribing, and they had what they call pill mills and for-profit medicine. So it is a problem, but the root problem is why so many people are becoming addicted, and we have to look at why so many people, feel like they have no hope in society, and they feel like they have no future. And so they have to turn to anesthetize themselves with drugs or alcohol. And, and all these problems are basically, they have the same common denominator, systemic abuses in society that radicalize people, that make people feel hopeless. And that's when addiction it becomes a big problem. That's when gun violence becomes a big problem. So when people say that, the doctors caused this epidemic, they're not really looking at the problem deeply. The problem is there's a systemic problem in society making people feel like their only option is to get high. And so they turn to drugs out of desperation. Okay, so the one way you combat that is you regulate it, and you legalize and regulate it. When the government has control over it, it's a lot easier to deal with the issue. If we just make things illegal and push it into the back alley, it's not going to help the problem. In fact, it's going to make it exponentially worse. So I always say we need to legalize and regulate all vice for the common good of society, or else the black markets will, and they don't care about addiction or society or kids or anything like that. And the biggest pushback I'll get is, they think everybody will start using drugs tomorrow. If drugs are legalized today, everybody's going to start using tomorrow. And that's bullshit. People that went their whole lives avoiding the trap of addiction and drugs are not going to wake up tomorrow because it's legal and going and become a crackhead or go and stick a needle in their arm. It just doesn't work like that. So that's number one. The same people that used yesterday will be the same people that use tomorrow if it's legalized. The only difference is they're not going to be using in a back alley somewhere. They're not going to be robbing neighborhoods somewhere. We gotta address the for-profit way that our society is built, and it affects everything. When we put profit over people in society, you end up getting hopeless people in society. You end up getting radicalized people in society. So the number one thing we can do is legalize and regulate it. If people are shown to be addicts, they should have to go to a clinic, and get their drugs free of charge at the clinic. And then they could do their drug. It'd be pharmaceutical grade, so you're not getting junk. It's a lot healthier. People wouldn't be leaving needles all over the community. People would have resources on hand, because that's the other thing. Nobody wants to be an addict. Nobody wakes up and wants to be addicted. Nobody wants to sell their kids stuff. Nobody wants to be trash in their loved ones' eyes. This is something that nobody plans on doing. And so we have to address this in the best way, not just, for everybody, but for society too, individuals and society. So making the drug illegal and pushing people into the black markets, that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the individual, and it doesn't help society at all, because then government has no control whatsoever. All right. When this all ties together too. When we think about the gun problem and stuff, last week when I talked about this, I even forgot to mention, a big part of this is, we drug our kids. We drug them with for-profit medicines like Adderall, which is basically cocaine. Then we teach them from birth to put profit over people in society, and then we cut the social safety net. So we're cutting public spending on things like healthcare, on things like education, and then we wonder why so many are growing up not respecting life, why so many are growing up radicalized. It's not the drug per se, it's not the guns that's the root issue, the guns or the drugs. It's the way we as a society, view life. It's the way we put profit over everything. This isn't that difficult to understand. So, when I'm talking about this issue and I tell people this, they automatically assume that, I want everybody to do drugs. That's the furthest thing from what I'm saying. I'm saying the best way to deal with drug addiction is by legalizing it and regulating it, by putting the resources in the right places to help people, not by criminalizing them, not by inflicting economic and police terror. That's not going to help. And it's the same with the gun issue. We can destroy every last gun on earth, but if we're still systemically radicalizing our society, the bloodshed is still going to continue, whether they take fertilizers and diesel and blow up the school, or whether they just mow people down in their cars. Focusing on these feel-good policies that don't affect the underlying systemic abuses that radicalize so many people to begin with is exactly the wrong thing to do. And this is what we do with everything in society. It seems in America especially, we don't like to look at the root issues. We like to lie to ourselves. We like to pretend everything is okay. And, basically, we like to lie to ourselves, and that's why things keep getting worse and worse and worse. If you notice, especially with the opioid problem, this didn't really start to happen. Drugs have always been a problem, but people weren't dying like this until recently, until the early 2000s, which coincides with when we went into Afghanistan. And we went into, first we started a proxy war against Russia in Afghanistan, and we empowered the Taliban, and we funded and armed the Taliban, and they, outlawed growing poppy, and they even gave the farmers subsidies to grow food. And then when we ended up pushing out the Russians, the Taliban turned their attention toward the West and us. And so we went in there in the early 2000s in the war in Afghanistan, and we took out the Taliban. We put them on the run. Well, guess what? Now nobody was forbidding the farmers to grow opium. Nobody was paying the farmers subsidies to grow food. So they naturally went back to their cash crop, and we had this whole country on lockdown. Nobody moves in this country without us knowing about it. So there's no way that, all this heroin and all this opium is getting produced and smuggled and we don't know about it. And in fact, if you look into it, you talk to soldiers, they'll tell you that they actually guard the fields. And when you look into the war on drugs from the beginning, every time we get into these proxy wars and these different conflicts, there's always blowback, and this is the blowback. We're flooding the whole world with cheap, good heroin. And then at the same time, domestically, we're cutting down on the legal supply of opiates. So the people that need opioid medications, are going to be forced into the illegal supply, and so you're creating this huge problem. Now people are becoming they have to be their own doctor on the black market. And so they end up, dying. There's no medical oversight. There's no regulation. Nobody knows what they're even getting, and other, people on the black market, they're capitalists too. They're trying to make money. So they end up cutting their drugs with, dangerous substance, other dangerous drugs. They'll cut heroin with, Xanax or Soma, muscle relaxers, sedatives, this, that, the other thing. And because everybody's different, people's bodies react differently, you end up getting a lot of overdoses. Okay, and this can be easily prevented. All right, not by inflicting more economic terror, not by inflicting more police terror, but by being smart. We got to affect the systemic things that make people feel so hopeless that they'll stick a needle in their arm, that they'll smoke crack. You know what I mean? That they'll do these things. We have to put the resources in place to help them, and we have to put the resources in place to help people. And I think that the number one way you do that is legalizing and regulating all vice for the public purpose. Okay, and it's the same with guns. I'm okay with an assault rifle ban. I really am. But when talking about the gun issue, the first thing that you should be talking about is the link between inequality and violence. That's the biggest link. It isn't guns and violence, because guns have always been with us from the beginning. In the 20s, there was Tommy guns. In the 70s, there was Uzis. And kids didn't bring them to school. This didn't start happening until the end stage of capitalism, the neoliberal period. And it's a bunch of factors. Again, cutting the social safety net, cutting education, cutting healthcare, teaching our kids from birth to put profit over people in society. And I keep repeating these things because this is the only truth there is, and it is that simple. Everything goes back to this. Every issue in our society has its roots in economics, and it has its macroeconomic remedy. So the way you affect both of these issues is you gotta invest in your society. You gotta invest in your society, and MMT shows us the way. Our operational reality shows us the way forward. We need a federally guaranteed living wage job for every single person that wants one. You want to fight hopelessness in society? This is how. All right. We need to fully fund the public purpose. Every school should be fully funded. Every hospital. Everybody should have health care, period. No health insurance at all. Health care, period. And there's no reason not to do this. If we're not investing in our society, then we can't get mad when our society starts to break down. We can't act surprised when our society starts to break down. When people start to grow up with no hope, with no respect for human life. That's a recipe for disaster. I don't see how this could end up any other way, really. And if you say, well, I don't teach my kids to put profit over people, we all do as a society. Every time our kids see, a homeless person, and around the corner they see an abandoned house, they're being taught to put profit over people in society. All right. Every time they see a jobless person and they see their community crumbling, needing human resources, needing infrastructure resources, they're seeing profit being put over people in society. Every time they see people dying of treatable, preventable illness, because of lack of cash, that's what they're being taught. And then on top of that, you're cutting healthcare, you're cutting education. Then you're going to drug them all with for-profit medicines like Adderall, and you're going to sit there with a straight face and pretend that the problem is guns or drugs. It isn't. The problem is our government. The problem is systemically radicalizing people in our society. All right. Drug law isn't about public safety. All right. Just about every illegal drug has a legal synthetic counterpart. All right. If you're talking about cocaine, you got Adderall, you got Ritalin, you got all kinds of amphetamines, all right, that are legal. If you're talking about weed, you got Marinol and you got other things like that. If you're talking about opium, you got Oxycontins and this and that. So there's tons of stuff out there. So, when people think we've been sold this bill of goods, this fake bill of goods, that doesn't add up if you really start to think about it. Drug law was never about public safety. It was always about corporate profits and control. The way that they made drugs illegal, the way that they got us to give up our rights to begin with was through fear. In the early days, they would say, black people would get high on cocaine and rape all the white women. They would try to link the drugs to different ethnic groups and different minorities. They would, like marijuana, they called it marijuana to try to make people think of Mexicans, to give them a negative connotation, because there was a time at the turn of the century when we had an addiction problem, but they couldn't go and make drugs illegal at that point. There would have been revolution. So they had to have a propaganda campaign. And, but the funny thing is how they did control addiction at that time. The government passed a law that required manufacturers to label what was in the medicine that they were taking. Once people understood what they were ingesting, the chemicals that they were ingesting were dangerous and addictive, people self-regulated. Because again, people don't want to be addicted. All right. People don't want to have their freedom taken away. People don't want to be a slave. And the same is true, well, it isn't the same for guns, but it's kind of the same. Guns have always been around. We didn't have this problem until the neoliberal era. And so, that's what I want to talk about. And so does anybody, I'm going to see if anybody got any comments that we can discuss, anybody that doesn't agree with any part of what I'm saying, just comment. I don't care. I want to talk about it now and get it out in the open. Like I say, we could make all guns illegal and destroy every last gun. That is not going to stop the bloodshed. All right. We can inflict more police terror and economic terror. That's not going to stop the opioid epidemic. All right. The only way to stop these things is through systematic change. All right. We got to invest in our society, invest in our people. We got to invest in the public purpose. Let me see. Well, yeah, exactly. People, you make people go out on the black market and have to survive on the black market, and there's going to be problems, even good people have to become monsters to survive on the black market, and I know people at the bottom who are good people, and they'll give you the shirt off their back. But at the same time, when you're on the street, you have to become a different person. You have to have a persona. You have to be an actor almost. Because if people if people think that you're weak or soft, then they take advantage of you. So, when at the bottom, when we can even work full-time jobs and we still can't put food on the table, so we're forced into the black market to survive, how is good supposed to come of this formula? And I see Phil Cleve says, have I ever tried to conceal a cannon? No, I haven't. I've never tried to conceal a cannon. But I don't see how that's relevant. People can conceal handguns and still do just as much damage as they do with assault rifles. And you can't really conceal an assault rifle, but they still do a ton of damage with that. So I'm trying to see if anybody got any arguments here that we can explore a little bit. Anybody that wants to say something. Let me see. Living a non-violent vegan lifestyle. Yeah, that's what Trish was talking about. Trish Roberts, she opened my eyes, as a matter of fact. I'm a hunter, a fisher. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. The other day I was watching her thing and she was talking about this cow that got away from the slaughterhouse and it just wanted to live so bad. And, when you think about it, I could see how it all fits together. The more that we are desensitized to suffering of any life, the more that we are okay with our own human suffering. But let me see. But yeah, back in the 50s and now we had a much stronger social safety net. That's the big difference. The neoliberal era started in the 70s. That's when they started cutting all these programs. It took a little while, but I think we really started to see the end result of that in the 90s. And that's when it really we started to see the end result of what happens when you privatize the public, the social safety net, and you cut social spending, public spending, and we put profit over everything. Everything has a price, even justice itself. Yeah, the black market was made by the U.S. because we made the laws. And just like when with alcohol prohibition, it made the mob super strong. It gave them tons of power and money. And as soon as so one of the big ways that we can fight the violence in the black market is simply to bring it out of the shadows, to legalize and regulate all vice for the public purpose. One of the ways that you fight, you fight both of it, addiction and guns, is you invest in society with a federally guaranteed living wage job for every single person that wants one. You fully fund the public purpose. We need to go back and have like a second Bill of Rights, like FDR was pushing in 1944, and we were able to do this back then. We had the real resources to do this all the way back then. So don't tell me we can't do it now. We have tons of real resources. That's not the problem. The problem is the way we distribute it. There's rich people out there that have 20 freaking houses, and yet there's people that are starving on the sidewalk with nothing. That's just not a fair society. And that kind of a society, there has to be disrespect for human life. I mean, how can somebody live with themselves that has 20 different houses and they drive by homeless people every day? There has to be some type of desensitization going on there, So I don't really see any naysayers, anybody saying that what I'm saying is wrong. Again, I would be okay with outlawing assault weapons if it was tied to a federally guaranteed living wage job, program. But that's the only way. I would, if I feel like they use these things, these feel-good policies to distract us from the bigger picture. You know, when we're focusing on, when we're focusing on gun law, we're not focusing on inequality. All right. So, but that's all I got, really. So thanks again. I was gonna have a longer one. I got my computer today, and I couldn't even get online with it. So I got to figure out what the hell's going on with my Wi-Fi and everything else. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Any other questions? Anything that I could talk about? If I don't see a comment here, I'm gonna just take off. No, Lau, you're a real progressive. You're allowed to have your you're allowed to be a gun owner and an omnivore, But these are still the facts that we're saying. I'm the same way. I'm a meat eater. I'm a hunter. I love guns. You know what I mean? But if there's a way to stop the bloodshed, I'm not going to say no. Just because of my feelings. But the fact is, just getting rid of guns by itself isn't going to do anything. All right, we have to change the underlying systemic abuses that radicalize so many to begin with. I always say, don't focus on the tools people use to go nuts with. Focus on why so many more people are going nuts to begin with. It's not that hard to figure out. When we inflict police and economic and police terror on society, you're going to get problems. You're going to have radicalization. All right? So if we want to stop the violence, stop the bloodshed, we better stop inflicting police and economic terror systemically on society. We better stop targeting unemployment, creating systemic poverty, okay? Because that's how you get a dog-eat-dog world. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming in, tuning in. Take it easy.